Okay, we're going to show you how to make a low profile radial palsy orthosis. So this is for that person who has a radial nerve lesion and they have drop of EDC, of wrist extensors, of thumb, sometimes but not always, and sometimes you'll make this where you don't have to include the thumb, but we're going to show you with the thumb because that's more common. And it holds the wrist in a given position because you can do wrist stuff without, but it gives them function because they can activate flexion but don't have extension of the digits. And so this splint brings them back up and they can activate through, gives them function in a low profile way without this big coat hanger hanging off their hand. So this is the piece of material we're going to make. Give you a frame of reference for Miranda. It's going to go from the PIPs, we'll trim it obviously, thumb as well, and about 2/3 the length of the forearm. Okay, so that's all the more I need. I'm going to drop that in. And while that's getting ready, let's talk about some of our supplies we're going to need. I'm going to use a 1/2 inch wide elastic strap. Okay? Using this is softer. It doesn't have the hard factory edges of a normal strap that we would use, but also gives a little bit more give to the patient when they flex down, and that's going to loop around the fingers. What draws that back up instead of just a continuous loop around all of them? We use an elastic string. Okay? And this comes in different gauges. I'm using this one because it's a little sturdier, but also there's a thinner one and then a really thin wire you can get, and they come from Orphicast or Orphit. Comes from Orphit. They have a tube system and they put these through it. For this radial palsy version, I like using this. It just adds a little bit extra stability and it loops through. There's other versions of it, lots of different ways to make the splint, but we're going to use this today. So let's see if that splint's ready.
And I'd also say with this, you can find similar stuff to this at like Joann's. So yeah, it just depends. If you don't have it right away, you can go to Joann's and get it. They kind of have different cables and different diameters.
Perfect. Okay, so my material's ready. I'm going to lay it on her hand. We'll come forwards here a little bit. I'm going to lay it on her hand, and I'm going to spread it out. I'll do a simple little stretch and tag at the volar aspect of the wrist just to keep that contour there. And I'm going to give her fingers a gentle spread here, just to fan them out a little bit. I'm going to push down a little bit through that thumb, that first web space, and I want to just make sure that I have good extension there. I actually want to migrate this a little bit distally because I didn't quite catch all of those IPs, so it allows me to do that, still have some working time. So I'm going to re-tag it there. I want to make sure I have that long finger P1 available there. And I'm just going to kind of go through here and spread that out. While it's cooling, I just want to make sure I have some decent space to work through for each finger because we don't really grab things with fingers closed. We want a more neutral resting position there. And so that gives me some good width to that. Make sure I have some space in here as a border on the radial side of that index finger and just kind of wait for it to cool. Then I'll take the wrist back just a little bit. You can, if it helps with the patient, because they don't have wrist extension to help hold it there, I'll put them on a ball like we would do for ball rolling for a wrist. I'll just put their hand on that, and that kind of mirrors that functional grasp, and then I can rest their wrist, or excuse me, their forearm on something to help keep that wrist in extension. About 30 degrees of wrist extension. Fingers are starting to get set, so we'll untag that and we'll trim that down. And I'm just going to go on that halfway mark of where the wrist and forearm is.
And if you struggle with where that is, Josh is not, because he's done so many of these. You can always mark it with the pen or your nail.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a newbie.
Okay, so here I want to make sure I come a little bit wide for that thumb, so I'll cut right at the level of those holes so I minimize how much of jagged edge I have there, and I'll round that just a little bit. And then I'm going to put this back on her, and again, like she said, I may mark it, but I'll also see like that index finger at the apex of that PIP is good, that one's good. This one needs to come down a little bit. It doesn't need to go past, and it only ends up being a catch point there. So I'm coming down like 2 holes, and then I can kind of see where that was on the small fingers well. So I'm going to kind of take it wide and angle it like that. Okay, so now I'm at those PIPs all the way across the board. For the thumb, I'm going to put a piece that runs through here so I don't need that triangle. I'm going to cut that little point off. And I round it just a little bit to make it look a little cleaner. Okay? I'll edge this when the time comes, just so I don't have jagged edges around here. For this purpose, we're not going to edge it right now, but you get the idea. I'm going to put our adhesive back hook on proximal forearm, distal forearm proximal to the wrist crease, so kind of over that ulnar styloid where that little area was. And then eventually I'll take these two pieces and put them down here, and they'll run at different angles. Then I have another piece that I'll put for the thumb that will receive this 1/2 inch Velcro, or the stretchy 1/2 inch strap. But first I want to put this back on her. Okay, and we're going to come here. And I'm going to work on identifying first how long I want this strap to be. So, thank you. It's a little stuck in there. Okay, so if I run it from the index finger around and I come across the back side, I need it about that long, okay? And I'm always going to cut longer because I can make it shorter later, can't make it longer later, okay? So if I want to follow through that same line on both sides, let's flip over here so you can see I want it coming across P1s, right? I want it coming across there, so it's going to support those. And the thread I put through later will help guide that and put it where it belongs. So I'm going to take these two, and that's going to be my guide where that strap just kind of naturally laid, okay? A lot of times we like to do continuous strips, but these, you kind of got to target it a little bit more, so it doesn't quite work as well. So again, coming across P1s and across here, I'll use that as my guide as to where to put that strap. So that's what we're looking at. Okay, so once I know where this is going to go, and I lay it there, I'm going to have her fingers spread where they kind of naturally fit, and I'm going to take a little marking wax pencil, and I'm just going to mark a spot on each of those that are going to be about that 1/2 inch apart, and that's going to give me a guideline on where I want to put, and I got to pull this one back a little bit. I'm going to have to put a hole down here, but that's okay. Where I want to put these through this thread that's going to loop through. So I've got a piece cut here already, but what I need to do is take those yellow dots, there's 6 of them because I have 1, 2, 3 web spaces, 2 holes each. I need to make those just a little bit bigger. I have an awl or a hole punch. If you have a leather punch, you can punch a hole in there. In this case, I could heat it. Honestly, I just kind of shove it through there and make that hole a little bigger. So I'm going to go ahead and do all 6 of those. And then I'll do this real quick while I'm... Okay, so I've got 2 of them ready between index and long and between ring and small. Let's do between the index and long now. So what I'm going to do is feed one through my pre-sized hole, and then I'll feed the other one through my pre-sized hole. Got to find it. Where'd it go? There it is. All right, so I take that and pull it through to the back side, and then I'm just going to tie 2 little slip knots. We'll test your knot tying skills. You decide what kind of knot you want to do, but basically something just secure that's not going to come apart on them because they can't retie these knots on their own. Those little elastic straps will give me the ability to expand those. And I may need to take up some slack off of here, that's why I cut it too long, and create some space for fingers, right? So I'll just kind of work that through and give myself lots of extra room to fit it on them, okay? And then I'll pull that and tighten it. With the patient, what I'll do is work on feeding small ring and long finger through these slots. And I want to make sure my strap is flat, okay? So we're going to feed through here, and then this other one loops around the index. But before I get there, I'm going to put my straps on to anchor the wrist in place. 1 and 2. And that just kind of means one less thing I have to hold on to because their wrist is going to drop. So I've got this tension here. Now I just pull to tighten on small finger as much as I need. I pull to tighten on each of them as I kind of work around the line, right? Okay, I get those flat. And then when I get to the index, I bring that around and it comes up across the back side. So now they have the ability, I'm going to turn over here, to bring those fingers down. And if that's too much resistance, I loosen the knots here and give them more slack there, or I loosen the tension on this strap that's looping through. Okay? I've got too much back here, trim that down as you see fit. Through the thumb, what I'm going to do is take another length of this, and I'll take a razor blade and off the patient, I'll mark first where I want that to go, what's on P1. So I'm going to mark a little line here. Okay? We'll take it back off the patient. The nice thing here is I pulled that off and I didn't actually need to. I'm going to take this off the wrist, and these patients will get pretty good at leveraging it down and kind of backing out of that. It comes off pretty easy. Putting it on in that droop position, they feed it into their fingers and then they set it on there. We're going to cut a little slit in here, and I'll show you why in a second. We don't need the string there. We'll show you why that little slit's there in just a sec. Okay, so we made that slit, cut it through here. I lay this over top, and I only want it to cover about half of the sticky back Velcro that I put on there, because now this piece is going to come around and loop around that thumb. And you can trim that to length when you need it, and that again allows that patient to pull the thumb down. And there's some natural flex to this. That's okay. If it's a big giant patient and they're pulling through too much, you can add another piece down the back side here and adhere that before you put the Velcro stickies on, but that gives her the ability to flex down. Early on, if they're a little weaker, you take some tension off of this, and it gives them more mobility of that thumb while still pulling them back up. As they get better, you can add some tension until they don't need it anymore. But this gives them a low profile, again, we trim all these guys down, a low profile version of a radial palsy splint that doesn't have a giant coat hanger hanging off of them. So takes a little bit of extra time to make compared to some of our other quick stretch and tag splints, but there you go.